For years, people kept asking how the world's boldest action star could sprint into explosions on screen but never walk toward his own daughter. Now at 19, Suri Noel, the same girl the world once knew as Suri Cruz, has finally stepped out with her truth, not through talk shows or headlines, but through the quiet life she built far from her father's huge shadow. Her voice comes through her choices, not a microphone, and what she reveals hits harder than anyone imagined. And please hit the subscribe button. It costs you nothing, but it means a lot to me. What she's been carrying is heavy, sad in a way that stays with you, and it's a story she held alone for over a decade. When she looks back, she can trace the first crack to a moment she was way too young to even process. Suri was born on April 18, 2006, at St. John's Health Center in Santa Monica, and her birth wasn't wrapped in joy, but in total silence. Her mother, Katie Holmes, followed Scientology's silent birth rule, holding back every sound while men in black suits watched over her, enforcing rituals she never asked for. Tom Cruise called it devotion, Katie called it survival, and for Suri, it became a memory she never wanted, the start of a life shaped by rules she'd spent her whole childhood trying to outrun. In those early years, Suri lived inside a world designed to look perfect from the outside. Red carpets, magazine covers, fancy estates, security everywhere, the picture of a shining Hollywood family. But behind those perfect photos, things were already cracking. Katie's parents were worried about the intense control tightening around their daughter and granddaughter, and friends noticed Katie never showed up anywhere alone, always surrounded by Scientology associates who moved like silent shadows, watching her every step like some unspoken surveillance team. Still, Suri didn't know any of that. What she knew were footsteps in the hallway, movie nights with her parents, warm hugs, and a father who seemed too big for the world. But when she turned 6, everything shifted. The footsteps stopped, the house went quiet, and the man who once held her hand in New York just faded out of her everyday life without a warning. June 2012 became the year everything flipped upside down. Her mother filed for divorce just days before Tom Cruise's 50th birthday, turning what looked like a normal celebrity split into one of Hollywood's fastest and wildest separations. To the world, it was gossip. But to a 6-year-old kid, it felt like the sky just opened and half of her world dropped away. And still, Suri didn't cry or shout. She just went silent. Because kids don't need explanations to know when someone they love is suddenly gone. Katie Holmes's quiet war had already begun long before the papers were filed. People thought she made a bold, last-minute move, but the truth Suri only understood years later, was that Katie had been planning her escape with tactical precision, smiling on magazine covers while mapping out her way to freedom like her life depended on it. Katie lived in a constant state of fear, moving like someone who knew every step could be watched. She swapped phones over and over, avoided certain hallways in her own home because she truly believed they were monitored, and she replaced staff she suspected were reporting back to the Church of Scientology. Every night, she held her daughter a little tighter, scared that a single wrong move could cost her custody. She picked New York as her battlefield because she knew the laws there leaned toward the parent fighting to protect a child's stability. She filed everything while Tom was in Iceland shooting oblivion, setting her plan in motion at the perfect moment, and he never saw it coming. He found out the same way the rest of the world did, through headlines splashed across every screen. For a man who spent his whole career controlling every detail of his public image, this hit deep. Court documents later showed the one thing Katie fought for above everything else, the right to raise Suri outside Scientology. Former members claimed Katie was scared that as Suri got older, she might be pushed into the strict Sea Org program, a place she believed no child should ever end up. To stop that from happening, she was ready to risk her career, her friendships, her safety, and every drop of privacy she had left. By July 2012, just 11 days after she filed, the divorce was finalized in record time. Tom agreed to pay around $400,000 a year in child support, take care of medical and school costs, and accept that Katie would have full custody. But money wasn't what Katie wanted. Freedom was the real prize. The next day, she and Suri slipped out of Los Angeles like ghosts, heading to New York City with nothing but suitcases and the hope that distance might finally protect them. But for Suri, that sudden move felt surreal, like waking up in a world where her father existed everywhere. Movie screens, posters, newspapers, but never in the seat next to her. Most kids build memories of their dad through bedtime stories, school events, or weekend trips. But Suri didn't get that. What she carried were fading snapshots from before she turned 6, the last time she felt like she had a complete family. After the move to New York, life shifted into a quiet rhythm shaped completely by her mother's protection. Katie walked her to school, cooked simple dinners, helped with homework, and did everything she could to shield her daughter from the attention that followed them like a shadow. But there was one thing she couldn't block out: the silence. As the years passed, Suri didn't watch her father as a daughter anymore. She watched him the way the rest of the world did, from a distance, through screens, as if he lived in another universe entirely. She watched him hang from skyscrapers, race through wild action scenes, and pull off stunts no other actor even tried, yet he stayed missing from the one role that mattered: being her dad. Every time she stepped into a bookstore or walked past a movie theater, his face was right there, larger than life. He was everywhere except in her world, and that absence carried a weight that grew heavier with every birthday that passed with no call, no message, not even a small sign. He remembered the child he once called a miracle. When she turned 10, the questions inside her shifted from soft confusion to sharp ache. "Where is Dad?" slowly became, "Why doesn't he come?" She tried to calm herself with stories, imagining he was just busy, too busy saving the world on screen to show up in her world off screen. But even kids eventually learn the difference between a tight schedule and a choice someone keeps making. By her early teens, Suri watched her friends get picked up after rehearsals and sports practices by their fathers, while she stood at the curb pretending it didn't sting. She learned emotional independence the hard way, not because she wanted to, but because she had no other option. She rode the subway alone, finished school projects solo, and carried her disappointments quietly so her mother wouldn't have to carry them too. Meanwhile, the media kept spinning stories, guessing and speculating like it was a mystery movie. Reports came out in 2013 claiming Tom had only seen Suri once after the divorce, and after that, no confirmed visits, no pictures, nothing. To the world, it became a Hollywood puzzle, but to Suri, it was just her normal, a life shaped by a father who felt more like a rumor than a real memory. And even inside all that emptiness, she never learned how to hate him. Kids don't jump to hate. They ache, they wait, they hope, even when it hurts. By the time Suri turned 14 in 2020, she was finally old enough to start searching for answers herself. She'd grown up hearing the whispers adults tried to hide, pieces about Scientology, custody battles, rules, restrictions, and the word control, spoken with a kind of tense energy she never forgot. She didn't understand any of it back then, but when the pandemic quieted the world and she finally had time alone with her thoughts, she went looking for the truth she was never given. She read interviews, watched documentaries, scanned testimonies from former Scientology members, and even though she wasn't named, she saw herself between the lines, not as a headline, not as a character, but as the collateral of a system she never picked and never wanted. Former members often explained how people inside the organization were discouraged from staying close to anyone outside it. Some even claimed relationships could be cut off if a family member left or refused involvement. Suri was just a kid, not a threat, not a problem, but she understood exactly what being outside meant. It meant distance. For Suri, outside didn't just mean distance. It meant separation on a level she couldn't fix. It meant having a father who either could not or would not cross a line drawn by something bigger than love, and that realization cracked something inside her. She didn't grow up hating Tom Cruise. She grew up waiting for him, waiting for a birthday message, waiting for a quick visit, waiting for a simple moment where he'd choose her over every other part of his life. But as she got older, she realized she'd been standing in that doorway for 12 long years, hoping to hear footsteps that were never coming again. When she was 15, she walked into the kitchen one morning and saw her mother quietly wiping tears after reading an article about Tom's latest blockbuster premiere. Suri didn't ask a thing. She didn't need to. The truth between them lived in the silence, heavy, mutual, and understood without words. Katie had carried the weight of her daughter's abandonment alone for years, never once letting bitterness spill into their home. Even with all that pain, Katie never spoke badly about Tom. She never used anger to shield Suri from the truth. She held on to one belief: some truths are too sharp to hand to a child before they're ready. And by the time Suri turned 16, she was ready. Not for the media's version of her life, but for her own truth, the one she'd been holding inside since childhood. Turning 18 in April 2024 wasn't just a birthday. It was a turning point, a moment where the law finally saw her as someone who could choose her identity, her voice, her future, without needing permission from anyone, not even the man whose last name she'd carried her whole life. She spent those weeks writing college essays that came straight from her silence, raw, honest sentences that even the admissions board felt in their chest. One line stood out: "Sometimes we don't grow up with love. We grow up with the space that love leaves behind." She didn't mention her father by name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who she meant, but for the first time ever, the story was hers, not a headline built around her parents. While most teenagers celebrated turning 18 with big parties, Suri spent hers staring at her reflection, seeing a young woman who'd spent half her life grieving someone still alive. She finally understood she didn't need to wait anymore. Not for a phone call that never came. Not for a hug that stayed missing. Not for an explanation no one planned to give. That day, she made a quiet decision that carried more strength than any shout. She would no longer carry the burden of being Tom Cruise's daughter. On May 17, 2024, she signed the official paperwork to become Suri Noel Holmes, choosing her mother's middle name as a tribute to the woman who carried her through the storm with nothing but grit and heart. She didn't cry. She expected she might, but instead, she felt relief, deep relief, the kind that settles when someone finally lets go of a thread that's only caused pain. And the world noticed the name change instantly. It popped up on her school programs, on the cast list for her performance in the Addams Family musical, and later on her acceptance papers for Carnegie Mellon University, where she chose to major in fashion. People tried to call it rebellion, but it wasn't rebellion at all. It was freedom, the kind that comes after surviving 12 years of silence and choosing to build a life without carrying his shadow anymore. Her new name showed up everywhere, on her high school graduation program, on the cast list for her role in the Addams Family musical, and later on her acceptance papers for Carnegie Mellon University, where she chose to major in fashion. People online tried to call it rebellion, but it wasn't that at all. It was freedom. The kind of freedom a young woman finds only after surviving 12 years of silence and stepping into a life finally untouched by his shadow. By the time Suri started her freshman year at Carnegie Mellon in the fall of 2024, she had already completed the transformation she'd been quietly building for years. She wasn't the child who had cameras shoved in her face anymore. Not the girl the world felt sorry for because her father stayed missing. And not the symbol of a Hollywood marriage everyone thought would last forever. She was just a young woman studying fashion, riding the subways in Pittsburgh and New York like everybody else, finally breathing in a life that belonged only to her. Katie visited often, helping her move into the dorms, carrying boxes with hands that were tired but grateful, smiling with the look of a mother who knew she had pulled off the impossible. She raised a daughter who survived fame, survived abandonment, survived years of public speculation, and still grew into a grounded, thoughtful, driven human being. When asked about her daughter, Katie kept it simple, saying, "She's an incredible person." But everyone knew Suri's strength came straight from her mother's resilience. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise kept living a life built on extremes, filming massive franchises, prepping for a NASA-supported movie that might be shot partly in outer space, signing multi-million-dollar deals, and breaking stunts that made the world gasp. Fans cheered every time he hung off a helicopter or a skyscraper or a speeding train. But one thing he never attempted again was the simplest step of all, walking across a room to rebuild a relationship with the little girl who once ran into his arms. Insiders say he still covers her education and medical costs, just like the 2012 settlement required. But he hasn't been photographed with her in more than 10 years. And according to people close to the family, there have been no private visits, no phone calls anyone knows about, no signs of any effort to repair the distance between them. The silence grew into its own kind of wall, tall, cold, and completely unbroken. Now, at 19, Suri has accepted that silence. She doesn't wait for her phone to ring on her birthday, doesn't hope for surprise visits, and doesn't keep a door open in her memory for someone who never returns. Instead, she's building her own identity, her own dreams, her own future, with a confidence forged from everything she survived. The little girl who once cried quietly into her hands now walks into adulthood using the name she chose, Suri Noel Holmes, owning her story for the first time in her life. The truth isn't something she runs from anymore, it's something she stands on. Her journey leaves us with one simple question. If you were in her place, would you reach out again, or would you finally let go? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the Vintage Pulse channel for more untold stories.